Caribbean American Forum.
Okay, Mr. Granger, with regard to moving on from the Linden Power Company issue, with regard to the general budget, the opposition AFC issued a statement saying it felt betrayed. As a matter of fact, the leader of the presidential candidate of the AFC, Mr. Kemrat Ramjatan, issued a statement that was carried on Demerara Wave, saying that he felt betrayed by the APNU because it didn't vote for certain cuts the AFC recommended to either super salaries of government workers who were on contract, or to tailor some of the budget from some of the ministries that had a, what we can say, slush fund during the elections. What's the AFC's position on that?
We have been in discussion with the Alliance for Change since last December. We've met them very regularly, and we have had to collaborate on numerous matters which were brought before the National Assembly. And we feel that the relationship has been cordial. As you know, the Speaker of the National Assembly is the leader of the Alliance for Change, and he could only have been elected with the support of a Partnership for National Unity. So it is a contradiction to say that the Partnership for National Unity has not been supportive of AFC. As far as this particular issue is concerned, there was earlier in the year, I think last month in March, financial papers 7 and 8, which were brought before the National Assembly. Initially, both AFC and APNU voted against the papers, but when the paper number 8 was reintroduced to the National Assembly, although we had what we thought was an agreement, Alliance for Change voted against our position, and we were left high and dry. We did not complain, we didn't cry, but it was very embarrassing for us when the Alliance for Change took a position which was at variance to what the position we adopted. So there is a precedent, in a sense, that the Alliance for Change voted in accordance with its own interests and not in support of a position which has been agreed with the Partnership for National Unity. On this case, we made it clear that we couldn't support a measure which was indiscriminately targeting persons who were genuine employees of the state. Some of them were ordinary workers. They were not fat cats. There were many people who earned very modest salaries who were involved, and the People's Progressive Party Civic Administration responded by bringing many civil servants onto the street outside of the National Assembly on the day in question. So we did not have the opportunity, and I think in the remarks of Mr. Kemrat Ramjatan, he pointed out that the motion had to be submitted in haste because it had to be ready within 24 hours before it was debated. And I want to point out this fact. A Partnership for National Unity has members from 5 different parties in the National Assembly. We are not a single party. We have 26 members, and we come from 5 different parties. The Alliance for Change, all 7 members come from a single party. But we have to coordinate with the views and the opinions of people from 5 parties. And it is quite impossible to simply bring about this sort of response that the AFC required in the time that was available. So for those reasons, we didn't vote at that time. In fact, we didn't vote at all. We simply abstained.
Okay, and by abstaining, the PUP was able to use its majority in terms of its plurality in the parliament to vote down the AFC measure, correct?
That is correct.
Now, given the fact that there seemed to have been some sort of expression of mistrust on both sides, what do you think, or do you think this augurs well for opposition unity in terms of being able to put the government in check and exercise the constitutional checks and balances which which you guys, which the AFC or the combined opposition of the AFC and the APNU were mandated to do at the last elections?
We see that the cooperation between APNU and AFC has already borne fruit. It has borne fruit most visibly in the election of a Speaker of the National Assembly, who is actually the political leader of the Alliance for Change. We have been meeting frequently, and we are committed to continue to cooperate with Alliance for Change. I do not believe that this is a major setback. As I said on a previous occasion, the AFC took a position, voted with the PPP to defeat the position that APNU had espoused. And this time, APNU simply was obliged to abstain because we could not support the threat to the work, to the livelihood of hundreds of civil servants who were not receiving super salaries. They are not fat cats. Some of these are receiving very modest salaries. It simply meant that some of them had actually decided to accept contracts, limited contracts with the government, rather than become career civil servants. It did not mean that they were receiving super salaries. That seems to be a misunderstanding which has been disseminated far and wide. But we behaved on the basis of principle, that we could not put people on the breadline. That was our principal position.
Okay, let's move on to the national budget. During the last elections, the combined opposition received a mandate from the people, and it's consequently it has become the majority in the parliament, meaning that we have a minority government. One would think that the government would want to cooperate. My understanding is that there was no input from the or significant input from the opposition in the construction of the national budget. Let me ask you, what aspect of the opposition agenda, or specifically the AFC agenda as articulated in its manifesto, was incorporated into the budget?
The truth is that as early as December, soon after the results of the elections were declared and Mr. Ramatar was installed as president, I personally announced that there should be a tripartite budget committee which should complete the work on the national budget for 2012. Despite the fact that this announcement was made since December, January passed, March passed, February passed, March passed, and it was only a few days before the budget was due to be introduced, that is on the 30th of March, that some attempt was made to contact Mr. Carl Greenwich, who was one of our two nominees. So the fault for delaying the consultative process is entirely that of the People's Progressive Party Civic. If they wanted to do a serious about consultation, that could have happened in December 2011. But my interpretation is that they didn't want to consult. Now, in truth, the budget is a massive document, and it requires detailed preparation on the part of scores of technicians. It is not something that could be drafted overnight. We understand that. Mr. Greenwich understands that. But we wanted to ensure that some of our concerns were put on the table. And we were not given an opportunity to do that. And on the 30th of March, the Prime Minister announced what I would call a fait accompli. He said, here is the budget. Well, we still have issues. And we are still attempting to discuss those issues. That is why we have called for consultations, even though the budget has been put on the table in the National Assembly. And those consultations have started to show some success. For example, as you know, there has been a change in the old age pension. And although the government had recommended only a $600 increase, they've now acquiesced in a $2,500 increase, which was recommended by a Partnership for National Unity. Let me explain one thing for the listeners and the viewers. The opposition cannot increase the size of the budget. In our jurisdiction, in the way we do things in this country, we can only make recommendations. It is a government document, and the government has sole or has exclusive right to increase the budget. Now, what we can do is make recommendations for the reduction of particular items, particular line items in the budget. But we cannot increase. So we have to negotiate. If we want the things that we're concerned about to be put on the table, we have to negotiate. And that is why we negotiate.
I want to follow up on that comment you made there about the responsibility for the budget lies strictly with the government. Now, under the laws, the legislature, which is the parliament, appropriates funds, and so the government, the executive branch, which is headed by the president, cannot spend money without the consent and approval of the parliament. So the parliament basically has to vote for the budget, even though it's presented to the parliament by the government. Seeing that the opposition, I guess people are thinking, is in the majority position in the parliament, and since you have to vote, one would expect the government to engage in meaningful and good faith negotiations with the opposition. One, are there good faith, meaningful negotiations with the opposition? And don't you feel that because the government is in the minority, that the opposition has a responsibility to its constituents to compel the government to include some aspect of your agenda into the national budget? Because after all, even though you're in opposition, you're part of the state. And secondly, you have to vote for this thing. So if you're going to vote for it, you'd want to make sure that your constituents are directly benefiting from it, would you not?
This is correct, and this is what we are attempting to do. Even though the budgetary process started, we have attempted to not only negotiate with the Alliance for Change or discuss our position with the Alliance for Change. We had several meetings with the Alliance for Change. So people mustn't run away with the feeling that we are not on cordial terms. But we've also been discussing with the government, because in the final analysis, it is the government which has to make the executive branch which has to make those changes. And we have been making recommendations, and that is why we were able to get an increase in the old age pensions, and we are looking for further changes before the debate or the examination of the estimates come to an end next week Wednesday. We're still in midstream, so to speak. We still have on Monday to discuss the regional administration, and on Tuesday and Wednesday we will discuss the Office of the President and some other sub-items like the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. So it's still a work in progress.